I used to think I knew exactly what kind of woman I wanted to fall in love with. She had to be beautiful, not just beautiful, but breathtaking, the kind of woman who would walk into a room and turn every head without even trying. I pictured her in heels that clicked across marble floors, hair shining under city lights, perfume that left the air a little sweeter after she passed. I imagined she'd have a confident laugh, that effortless charm people in movies seem to have, and that we'd go to fancy dinners and take photos that made other people secretly wish they were us. That was my dream, the glamorous kind of love. I didn't know then how hollow that dream really was. But the thing about life is it doesn't hand you the lesson until you're ready to understand it. Mine came one warm afternoon in early spring, when the air smelled faintly of rain and possibility. I was at the community center downtown, half-heartedly helping with a volunteer project my friend Mike had dragged me into. We were supposed to be setting up tables for a small charity event, something about supporting caregivers and families with disabilities. I wasn't really paying attention. I was mostly scrolling my phone between tasks, waiting for an excuse to leave early. That's when she walked in. Or rather, that's when she came in, not walking, but carefully pushing a wheelchair that carried an elderly woman wrapped in a floral blanket. I remember the sound of the wheels, soft but steady, as they rolled across the floor, and for some reason I looked up. She wasn't at all what I'd imagined when I pictured the girl of my dreams. Her clothes were simple, her jeans faded from too many washes, and her hair was tied up in a loose bun, a few strands escaping around her face. She had no makeup on, no perfume I could smell, no fancy jewelry, but her eyes, there was something in them. A kind of quiet strength, a gentleness I couldn't quite explain. She smiled at the woman in the chair as she adjusted a blanket, and it wasn't a polite smile or a forced one. It was real, soft, full of care. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop watching her. Her name was Lena. I found that out when she came over to the refreshment table I was standing near, trying to pour a cup of coffee with one hand while steadying the wheelchair with the other. I offered to help, mostly out of instinct, and she thanked me with a voice that was warm, calm, and kind. We started talking. She told me the woman she was caring for was her grandmother who'd suffered a stroke 2 years ago. Lena was her full-time caregiver, balancing that with part-time shifts at a local diner. I remember thinking how matter-of-factly she said it, no self-pity, no drama, just quiet strength. Somewhere between the second and third cup of coffee, I realized I was listening more closely than I'd listened to anyone in a long time. After that day, I kept thinking about her. Not because of the way she looked, though the more I remembered her, the more beautiful she seemed, but because of how she made me feel. There was something grounding about her, something steady in a world that often felt rushed and fake. I found myself volunteering more often, hoping I'd run into her again, and I did. A week later, then again the week after that. Each time we'd talk a little more, sometimes about small things like movies or the weather, sometimes about heavier things like family and dreams. She told me she'd once wanted to study nursing but had to drop out to take care of her grandmother. Life doesn't always wait for us to be ready, she said once with a small smile. But it still gives us what we need to learn who we are. I didn't realize it then, but I was learning something too. I was learning that beauty isn't in the shimmer of a dress or the glint of jewelry. It's in the way someone's eyes light up when they talk about someone they love, or how they keep showing up even when life gets hard. The more I got to know Lena, the less my old dream of glamour made sense. One afternoon, I offered to drive her home after the event. Her car had broken down and she'd taken the bus with her grandmother. She hesitated at first but eventually said yes. When I pulled up to her place, I was surprised. It was a small, weathered apartment complex near the edge of town. The paint on the building had faded and a few kids were playing with chalk near the curb. She lived on the ground floor, easier access for her grandmother's wheelchair, she explained. As I helped her carry a few grocery bags inside, I noticed the space was modest but clean and full of life. Photos lined the wall, most of them of her and her grandmother smiling in different seasons. There were potted plants near the window, a hand-knit blanket on the couch, and the faint smell of vanilla and soap in the air. It didn't feel like poverty. It felt like home. Her grandmother, Mrs. Carter, was sitting by the window knitting slowly. She looked up at me with sharp blue eyes and smiled. "You must be the boy who can't stop volunteering lately," she teased. I laughed awkwardly, realizing Lena must have mentioned me. That evening we shared tea and talked for hours about life, about love, about simple joys like morning light and good coffee. When I finally left, the sky was painted with the soft orange of sunset and something in me felt different. Lighter. Clearer. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I found myself making excuses to see Lena, dropping off groceries, fixing a broken lamp, or helping with errands. She never asked for help, but she always accepted it with gratitude and warmth. Sometimes we'd sit outside on the small porch, her grandmother dozing beside us, and talk about everything from music to dreams. I told her once that she deserved so much more money, more freedom, more time for herself. She smiled and said, "Maybe, but I already have more love than I ever dreamed of. Isn't that what really matters?" That line stuck with me. One summer evening, as cicadas hummed and the air smelled of cut grass, Lena told me something that made my heart twist. Her grandmother's health was declining and she worried about what would happen next. I remember reaching out, holding her hand and telling her she wasn't alone. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment it felt like the world went quiet. No pretense, no perfection, just truth. I don't know when it happened, but I fell in love with her. Not in the loud, movie scene kind of way. It was quieter, like realizing you've been humming the same song for weeks without noticing. She made me want to be a better man, not because she asked me to, but because she showed me what grace looked like. One afternoon, after months of friendship and gentle closeness, I decided to tell her how I felt. I invited her to sit with me on the small porch that evening, the sun casting long golden streaks across the wooden floorboards, the air warm and fragrant with summer flowers. My heart pounded as I searched for the right words, but I realized there were no perfect words for what I felt, only truth. Lena, I began, my voice trembling slightly, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to understand it myself, but I think I've fallen in love with you. I waited, bracing myself, expecting her to look shocked or startled, maybe even laugh. But she didn't. She simply looked at me with those steady, compassionate eyes that had first drawn me in months ago, and she smiled softly. I think, she said, I've been waiting for you to notice what's been right in front of you all along. Relief, warmth, and a rush of happiness flooded me at once. I reached for her hand, and she took it without hesitation. That moment was quiet and perfect, not because it was dramatic or glamorous, but because it was real. The world seemed to fade, leaving only the two of us, connected in a way I'd never imagined possible. Over the following weeks, our bond deepened. We spent evenings helping her grandmother together, laughing at small mishaps, sharing stories about our childhoods and dreams. I learned that true beauty isn't a glimmering dress or sparkling eyes alone. It's patience, it's kindness, it's the courage to show up for someone else day after day without expectation. Lena's life wasn't perfect. Her apartment wasn't luxurious. Her wardrobe wasn't designer, but her spirit, her heart, and the love she gave to those around her, that was the kind of beauty that changed me, the kind of beauty I hadn't even known I was searching for. One sunny afternoon, I surprised her with a small picnic in the park, nothing fancy, just a blanket, sandwiches, and lemonade. She laughed when she saw me carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers I had picked on the way, teasing me about being ridiculously cheesy. I grinned, but my heart was serious. Sitting there together, watching children play and the sunlight dance on the grass, I realized that everything I had imagined in my dreams, the glamour, the sparkle, the perfect dates, paled in comparison to this. Sitting next to her, holding her hand, and seeing the genuine joy she brought into every small corner of life, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Weeks turned into months, and our love grew quietly and beautifully. I learned to help without expecting recognition, to listen without thinking of my own reply, and to see beauty in acts of care and humility. One evening, Lena asked me to help her grandmother onto the porch swing, and as I did, she leaned close to me. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked. I nodded, smiling. "I thought you were glamorous," I said, laughing softly. She tilted her head, teasing. "And now," I said, "I know what real beauty is, and I see it in you every day." She blushed and we laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes from shared understanding, trust, and love that has grown deeper than I ever expected. The thing about that moment and about everything that followed is that I finally understood what my younger, naive self couldn't see, that love isn't about appearances, about luxury, about perfection. Love is about connection. Love is about patience, care, and generosity of spirit. Lena taught me that by living her life fully and lovingly, despite the challenges she faced, by showing grace, empathy, and humility, she embodied everything I had thought I wanted, but in a way my heart had never recognized until it met her. Over time, we celebrated small victories together, finishing a long week of work, seeing her grandmother smile, cooking a meal together, even just sitting quietly with our hands intertwined. Every simple act became a reminder that love isn't measured by glitter or applause, but by the depth of care and the warmth shared between two hearts. Eventually, I asked Lena to consider moving in with me, but she insisted on keeping her apartment. It was her home, a place full of memories and love. I understood completely. I didn't need to change her life, and she didn't need to change mine. We created our life together around her routines, her grandmother, our shared values, and the quiet, steady joy of simply being present for each other. And though the glamorous girl I once dreamed of never existed, I realized that she never could. She was someone far better, real, grounded, kind, and wholly human. Lena, with her wheelchair and her small apartment and her heart so wide that it could hold the weight of others' struggles, became the dream I never knew I was searching for. That day, months later, I stood on the porch watching the sunset with her beside me, her grandmother smiling in her chair, and I thought about how life had taught me a lesson more beautiful than I could ever have imagined. True love doesn't arrive in glittering gowns or sparkling shoes. It arrives quietly, through the grace, courage, and heart of someone willing to care for the world around them, and in doing so, care for you too. And in that realization, I understood that I hadn't just found love. I had found the kind of love that transforms the soul, that redefines dreams, and that teaches you the real meaning of beauty.